What's up, friends? This is your pal Miles here, and welcome to Shaboovie. And for those of you who don't know what Shaboovie is, I take a show, a book, and a movie, hence the above fancy title and logo made by my sister Deanna. She's awesome. She also made the website, so gotta plug Deanna here. But basically, I take one of each of those bits of media, the media that I'm obsessed with, and I tie them all together with a unifying theme. And so, for example, if we take the book Michael Jordan, The Life, the miniseries The Last Dance, and of course the cinematic classic Space Jam, and we tie all those together, our theme would be that Michael Jordan is the greatest basketball player of all time. I'm not sorry to LeBron James. He's a crybaby, and he's just like not a winner, guys. So I don't know what you want me to say. But anyway, so this week on Shabuvi, never mind, something else that I need to bring up to you guys, it's actually pretty apt that I made that mistake right now, is that Shabuvi occurs in real time because I don't like to edit. It scares me. It seems like a terrible time. So this occurs in real time. I might spit on myself. I might misspeak. I might make up words. I might curse. Like, whatever, guys. It's just, I don't want to edit, so you're going to get the Jack Bauer real time experience. So, anyway, what I was saying before is this week's theme is mortality. And obviously, everyone is afraid to die. And while some of us may be a little bit more religious than others, some are not as confident in what comes after our lives are over. And that's why that's trepidation and hesitation around what happens after we die and what that means for our own mortality is such a prevalent topic across shows, books, and movies. Listed a few here. The Good Place is an amazing show all about the philosophy of life and death and how to live your life. Leftovers is my favorite show of all time, all about living with the things you can't explain in life every day. Never Let Me Go is an amazing book I read recently. I wept. There's actually a review for it on the website. Banshees of Inisherin, Seven Seal, some great other movies about mortality. But we're going to go a little bit deeper in talking about mortality today, and we're going to talk about accepting life and accepting death. And we're going to examine these or this theme through checking out the show 6 Feet Under, the book Lincoln in the Bardo by George Saunders, and It's a Wonderful Life, one of the best movies ever. And so we'll start off with 6 Feet Under. Oh, let me move my face back over here. But yeah, 6 Feet Under, which is oddly enough, I think I've done 5 Shabuvi episodes, maybe 6. And this is the second Alan Ball show that I've included in the Shabuvi episode. I don't know why. Like, I'm not like a huge Alan Ball fan, but I included True Blood in a vampire episode earlier, which you should check out if you haven't yet. But 6 Feet Under is Alan Ball's masterpiece. It's an amazing show. 5 seasons in the early 2000s. And the premise of 6 Feet Under is you have a family, the Fishers, who run a funeral home. And because they're so close to death every day, they're a little screwed up people, pretty dysfunctional. But they're amazing characters and it's amazing cast. And they're drawn together by the death of the patriarch, who's Nate Fisher Sr., and he's played by the amazing Richard Jenkins. But the cast is pretty incredible. This is the whole gang here. And like I said, basically, we see these guys, and what makes 6 Feet Under extraordinary is that we see all of them kind of deal with having like the presence of death hovering over them every single day, which really we all are dealing with that. But it's much more dominant in these guys' minds because they are literally encountering it every single day in the funeral home. And so they deal with it in different ways. We have Nate Jr. over here, played by Peter Krause, who goes through all sorts of relationship issues. We have Michael C. Hall, pre-Dexter. This is the best acting of his career. I don't care what any of you Dexter people say. He's amazing in this show, and he's struggling with his sexuality in terms of how much he wants to come out to other people and his own relationships. Basically, 6 Feet Under really boils down to relationships and how these people are navigating it based on how they think they should live their lives because of the presence of death that's omnipresent in their lives. And 6 Feet Under does a really great job of really hammering that point home because every episode starts with the death of a random person, the person that's going to end up at the funeral home. So it just sort of reminds the viewer not only what the people in the show are dealing with, but it also sort of is supposed to remind the viewer of how present and possible death is all the time. But it's not in a morbid way. 6 Feet Under can definitely get pretty sad, but it's not in a unwatchable or just really like I said, morbid or depressing kind of way. It's actually a pretty hopeful show. And I wanted to include a clip here to show that. And basically, this clip is 40 seconds long, but it actually does a really great job sort of summing up what 6 Feet Under is all about as a whole. Forgive the random Spanish subtitles here, by the way, also.
Why do people have to die?
To make life important. None of us know how long we've got, which is why we have to make each day matter. And it sounds like your Aunt Lillian did exactly that.
Yeah, she did.
And you can be happy for a life well lived. That's the most any of us can hope for.
Bam. How about that for consolidating the entire theme of a TV show into 40 seconds? And basically summing up like how you should be living life in 40 seconds. It's pretty amazing. It almost stinks that this is in like season 1 finale as opposed to the series finale, which is one of the greatest series finales of all time, by the way, to this day. Um, but basically, that is the as much hardship as these people go through, trying to live their best lives and trying to make their lives important, with death hovering over them every day. Up, uh, Eventually, this is the theme of 6 Feet Under, which is you want to make your life important because you don't know when you might go, and so it's ultimately a very optimistic point of view. Oh, I always do that. I click it and then it comes back on. Goodness gracious. Anyway, so now we're going to pivot over to the book side of things, Lincoln and the Bardo, which is probably, you're like, what the fuck is this book? I've never heard of this in my life. But it's a modern classic. Came out like 5 years ago, written by George Saunders, who's just like the master of the short story. And this is his first novel he ever wrote. George Saunders, I am just a sycophant for this guy. He's one of my favorite authors ever. Lincoln and the Bardo is actually my second favorite book of all time. You can see that in the book rankings on the website also. But basically, what Lincoln and the Bardo is about is it's based on a rumor that George Saunders heard, which may or may not be true, which is that when Abraham Lincoln, obviously, when his youngest son, Will, died unexpectedly of an illness, it was rumored that he would go and visit the graveyard of his son and go into the crypt and hold his son's body and just mourn over his son. And so George Saunders took that to fantastical heights. And it's not exploitative or anything. Like it's a really touching book still, and he does Lincoln proud, by still really examining their relationship and that grief. But he does take the idea and run with it a little bit and make it pretty supernatural, because what ends up happening is after Will dies, his spirit is just like stuck in this graveyard, and that is the Bardo. It's a Buddhist term where it's basically a limbo, and there's hundreds of ghosts that are stuck in this Bardo, in this graveyard, that Will meets. And there's a token, like 3 or 4, that kind of lead the story, but there's seriously so many to name. And George Saunders is amazing because the book is so small, but he introduces you to literally 166 ghosts and gives them all a distinct personality and voice. It's really, really cool. But basically, Will is, all these guys say trapped, but they're not trapped, because they're willingly staying in the Bardo because they're afraid of what happens after, and they are in denial about the fact that they're dead. They call their coffins sick boxes because they're just like, oh, yeah, when I was ill, I was in my box, but like I'm okay. I'm just like wandering around now. So they're all just like delusional. All these ghosts don't want to believe they're actually dead, and that's why they're stuck in the graveyard, because they haven't been able to have that acceptance and move to whatever comes next. So not only do you have Abraham Lincoln, who's hung up on mourning for his son, deservedly, of course, but you have his son who's hung up on mourning his life, along with all these other ghosts, and just mourning the idea that their life is finally over. And again, we could venture into some pretty treacherous and morbid and just devastating territory here, and it is a pretty sad book, but there's ultimately like a levity and an optimism in this book as well, on top of 6 Feet Under, for example. Because once again, we see at the climax of the book, potential spoiler here, that Will ultimately, as a child, accepts that, his time on Earth is done. And he has to move on so that his father can move on. And he's causing his father pain by staying around. And these other ghosts see Will in that inspiration, and a lot of them decide to depart and leave the Bardo too. So it becomes sort of this overall acceptance of life as it is. And once again, much like 6 Feet Under, it turns into an acceptance of living the most of your life and getting the most out of your life, and whatever happens happens, because death is just a part of life. And as sad as it is, we have to be able to move on, whether we're living with death or we die ourselves. So once again, it's a really, really, really powerful book. It's also like super funny, like really raunchy out of nowhere. Highly, highly recommended. But again, some of that optimism in terms of living life to the fullest, and accepting and dealing with your own mortality. But hot damn, if you want the feel-good movie about kind of death, but life more so, you gotta go It's a Wonderful Life. If you people haven't seen this movie, like, what the fuck do you do every Christmas? This is like the greatest Christmas movie of all time. Christmas Story is great, but like, whatever. And it's also just like one of the best movies ever. It's incredible. I think like AFI did a list of their top 100 greatest American movies ever, and it was like number 15 or something. It's an incredible movie, guys. It's a top 20 favorite movie for me. You can see that on my favorite movie list on the website too. And it basically invented a whole like plot conceit, which if you haven't seen It's a Wonderful Life, you've seen in something else, which is like how much the plot concept is basically how much do I really matter? If I wasn't here, would it make a difference? And of course, in It's a Wonderful Life, you have George Bailey, played by the freaking goat, Jimmy Stewart. And he goes through so much trouble in his life that eventually he considers suicide. And because he says to himself, like, what good am I? Like, I didn't do anything good enough to change anybody's lives. Like, I haven't made a difference. And what drives him to that are two things. One, his devotion to his family, who he feels like he's letting down in a way because of the other side of his life, which is the business side of his life, because he's carrying on his family business. Even though he had bigger and better dreams to go travel, he decides to stay home and save his family business. He's got to deal with this ugly monster up here, Lionel Barrymore as Mr. Potter, like an awesome villain, all-time villain. But basically, with balancing that business with trying to raise a life and accepting that he's maybe not living the life that he initially envisioned himself, causes him a ton of frustration. And like I said, he thinks about killing himself, which is when he's saved by his guardian angel, which is a little quirky. It's a little cheesy. It's 1946. Like, come on, guys, listen up. But played by, we have Clarence over here. Clarence, guardian angel. Love doing a good Jimmy Stewart voice. But basically, in his suicidal funk, he tells Clarence, like, I don't matter. I failed my family. I failed my business. If I never existed, it wouldn't make a difference. And Clarence goes back and basically wipes out George from existence and shows him what life would be like. And people are miserable. And you realize, even though George Bailey is like an incredible movie hero, an everyman hero, he's not like an unrealistic character. He's a real person. And Frank Capra and his other filmmakers did that on purpose, because they want to make it clear that even a smaller life can have huge reverberations and huge impact. So that even if you think yourself insignificant and your life insignificant, it's not. There's actually a ton of repercussions, positive repercussions that you can have in your life just by living your life and just by being good to people. And by doing so, it gives George an entirely new lease on life. And it's awesome. There's this great scene here I'm going to play.
Yay! Yay! Hello, Bedford Falls! Merry Christmas! Merry Christmas, George! Merry Christmas, George! Merry Christmas, movie house! Merry Christmas, Emporium! Merry Christmas, you wonderful old building and loan! Hey! Merry Christmas, Mr. Potter! Happy New Year to you! In jail. Go on home, they're waiting for you.
So, I mean, he's excited to see the movie theater. He's excited to see his, like, arch nemesis. And basically, he just realized that, like, every part of his life, good and bad, is a great part of his life. And one of the best lessons, too, that you can learn from It's a Wonderful Life is written on this little Christmas card up here. It might be kind of hard to read, but his guardian angel writes him and says, "Remember, no man is a failure who has friends." Oh, it's emotional stuff, honestly. It gets me a little emotional. It's like that quote has literally done great things for me in my life personally. And that's what makes It's a Wonderful Life so special. And I feel like really ties a bow on this theme of accepting mortality and accepting life and accepting death, because you basically just have to make the most of your life and appreciate that what you're living is making a difference, and that eventually that might end. So you need to make sure that you're not getting too bogged down in that fact and you're just living life as you should. So I hope that wasn't too convoluted or anything, guys. I always have to set these videos. But I appreciate you guys a ton for watching. And of course, you got to do the usual stuff. You got to go on the website. You got to subscribe. You got to go to Instagram. You got to go to Facebook and like me, please. Do all that good stuff for me, And also let me know what you guys want to see next. I kind of pulled this one out of my ass a few days ago as one I wanted to do. But I love all these bits of media, so those are pretty easy for me. But yeah, thanks for watching. Go live your life to the fullest. And remember, no man is a failure who has friends. Thanks, guys. Thanks for watching.